March 8th, International Women's Day. Deep into night again, my home almost quiet. I should sleep, but I can't. In our bedroom, my wife rests peacefully. I get up and return to my workroom, taking out paper, opening my PC, pen, keyboard. Our house stirs through the vents. Sights on my screen multiply like cells, and I'm writing things down, trying to find pathways to truly perceive. This is Genesis in overdrive. Once there was the Earth. Through communication technologies, the Earth became the global village. With the advent of satellites, the village became the cosmopolis. Then it became the global theater. Then PCs and handheld devices, the rule of screens and smartphones, vistas of mobility, instant messaging. In the crucible of this experience, we find consciousness expanded, sensibility stretched. We ravel the threads, the wirings that are conduits for streaming the rush and overflow of transmissions. This book, in many ways, is charged with prenatal perceptions. It's before conception. It is to a great degree pre-theory, that is, it's too soon for theorizing what it is that's going on. And while the book is challenging and difficult in some ways, it's meant to use obscurity, indirection, streaming, image, symbol, metaphor, and designs as a way to invigorate, inspire, provoke, and draw the reader. It's using poetics as a way to reimagine our unnameable present. So one of the questions then that I would like to work with is the beginning is, what do I mean by the charge? What is the charge? And the charge is the voltage, the fuse, the plug, the socket. It is what we receive and what revs us. It's the adrenaline and the energy, the impulse that is in our structures and systems and experiences and receptivities. The word also means cost, expense. What is the charge for being here, for being now, for being part of the unnameable present? It also means accusation. What is it that's coming at us? What is it that accuses us, that charges us, that attempts to surround us, engulf us, and sometimes to blame us? It also means attack, assault. It also means possession. Something takes charge. And I like to say that I don't do interviews anymore, I just do possessions. That allow things to come to you. That openness and receptivity brings the great risk of the ecstasies of our time, which are overwhelming the self, overwhelming our identities, overwhelming our humanity. So that in great degree, the charge that is rearranging our senses as we have rearranged our time and place by our technological inventions is the charge that surrounds us, engulfs us, immerses us, and asks us to be surrendered to it, and as a form of, I suppose one could say, a kind of possession. It is also, the word charge is legacy. It comes from the Kabbalah. It means what is handed on. The charge is something that could be called tradition. Kabbalah actually means tradition. And what it suggests is that we are charged with the meaningfulness of the vocation of responding to what's going on. And so the book is in many ways an attempt to respond to what's going on around us. And the face that's on the cover, which comes from the street art that Marshall Solis put together for this book. Beautiful work that he gave to the book to allow it to enlarge its capacity into a visual dynamic. The face is looking at us, staring at us. It's a female face, of course, and a woman's face that is accusing, charging, and at the same time addressing, challenging, inspiring, and questioning. What else does the charge mean? It means conviction. that if you have a charge, you are on a mission, as it were, to try and understand, to perceive, to see, to describe, to evoke, to invoke. What do you see coming? We can't know, but whatever comes, it will, whether we want it to or not. The charge is also revitalizing. It means to be charged up, to be revved, to be inspired. And one of the processes that I've been deeply involved in the last years has been to study the codes of inspiration. What are the codes that inspire us? What are the ancient codes, and what are the primary hermetic secrets? That is, what is it that has moved literary art and poetry and creativity itself for decades and decades and centuries? And one of the things that haunts this book is the idea that everything speaks. Wires speak, trees speak, waters speak, winds speak. Animals have their language. What we create, our artifacts have their language. And that the electric world, that is the world of cell phones, telephones, iPhones, eye screens, the world that is now dominating us more and more because of the pandemic has driven us so much inside and online, that the world has been changed into one in which vibration is everything. Ping, network, link, and disconnection, and breakage, and at the same time as all of these other factors and elements and streams, things that dislocate us and put us into the echolocations of the networking aura, as it were. The charge in the global membrane was an attempt by one person, and then in collaboration with the artists and the designers and the editor, Dale Winslow, to create a manuscript that at once imitates, parallels, and captures the great charge that is occurring in our time, the transformations of consciousness and the transformations of receptivity, sensitivity, susceptibility, and awareness, and at the same time to comment on that, to discuss it, to highlight it through poetry, story, essay, aphorism, fragment. It's also the refractions and reflections of one sensibility, that is the person who wrote it, i.e. myself, in an attempt to receive and understand what's going on around me. The book is written in a mosaic style, but it's a mobile mosaic, as you can see. It moves from place to place, jumps from place to place. And we know from physics that atoms will jump from place to place, sometimes without necessarily a clear trajectory. They just simply move from one place to another. This is known as discontinuity. And the discontinuity of this book is not to enforce breakage on the reader or the listener or the receiver or the respondent. It is an attempt to reflect what is going on around us and use the gaps between images, stories, lines, fragments, pieces, in order to allow the reader to inject themselves. And that's why the end, when I say on the last line, what do you see coming? It's an invitation to the reader to insert themselves into this book and to write their comments in the margins, or to respond to the book, not to me personally, but to what's being said inside the work. It is also a work in which the charge is an attempt to rev up response, as it were, to the complexities of our time. I was explaining to a friend of mine what the book is about, and she said, "It sounds like it's about everything." And I said, "Well, maybe." And she said, "Does it tell you how to make a good cup of coffee?" And I said, "No, it doesn't do that." Then it isn't about everything. But any attempt to write about everything right now would create an implosive text that would either be so long that no one could possibly follow it, or a hypertextual connection that would lead from one thing to another, to another, to another. Also, the work is very much about an attempt to bring understanding of the streaming of all together. All at once is all of us. from inside the waves, the streaming into collective cognition and corporate emotion, the new consciousness and sensibility that is at work in our time and place. There are no page numbers, and that is because I wanted people, as I said, to go backwards and forwards, to move up and down. The tone of the book is reserving judgment. It talks about Trump on occasions. And when I do talk about Trump, I don't take the usual moralistic standpoint that most people have with him. I abhor him, but that is not necessarily relevant to trying to understand the phenomenon that he represents, which is that he is an extraordinary galvanizing, polarizing point in our time and his use of media, a media adept who up until the recent election in 2020 understood very well how to get attention, maintain attention, and to spark dialogue through controversy and extreme comments and observations. I'd also like to point out too that that this is a book that, in a sense, looks like a manuscript. It is a work that tries to indicate or reveal, as it were, that we're in the frontier where publishing has changed. And the frontier where publishing has changed, the wilderness, as it were, where we no longer know where books go, how they'll be produced, who will be reading them, what kind of book industry there will be, that a book will become something that is in itself a kind of stream of waves of the nowhere now here that I like to describe as being the unnameable present. There is a tinge of orality in the book, which is that it's better to perform it than it is to actually read it. And it seems to me that we are all at once standing by the current and the data flux, like Siddhartha's meditating on the flow, the data flow that is the new flood, exercising, we hope, the practice of patient grief, to use the words that W.H. Auden used, to understand that the streaming that in our time will bring anguish, complexity, difficulty, invention, aspiration, disease, unease, pandemia, and new media. It is also a work in which there is, the elliptical is present, because the elliptical leads us to enigma, and the enigma and strangeness of our time need to be understood as being very much the way that we are engaging new processes. Know your selfie. We are souls among the sensations. Data never sleeps. Hackers understand that we are in a new environment of streaming and interference. I sing the body electric. The armies of those I love engirth me and I engirth them. They will not let me off till I go with them, respond to them, and discorrupt them, and charge them full with the charge of the soul. It's from Leaves of Grass. And by the way, the 1855 edition of Leaves of Grass had no page numbers. There are no page numbers in The Charge in the Global Membrane. So beginning at the end, as I did, is just as intelligible a process with this book as it would have been with Leaves of Grass, which is to go backwards, forwards, up and down, around, circular, inside, outside, to flow with it, move with it, counter it, add to it, enhance it, or to dismiss parts of it, disagree, agree, and move backwards and forwards through the current that the book tries to embody and manifest. In our time, all is current, moving in a hypercharged way, so all is vulnerable to obsolescence. And one of the reasons why this book may seem behind the curve in some ways is because it did not talk about the pandemic, and it didn't see the pandemic coming. I don't know how anyone could have. 10 months ago, the world changed, And now the world is so profoundly different from what it was that those of us who have tried to write and understand the unnameable present are struck by the fact that so much of what we're saying is obsolete. But obsolescence does not mean that it is useless. It does not mean that it is something that we need to reject. What it means is that the frames, the perspectives, the streams, the visions that you tried to provide are changed by the circumstances in which you read them, and in which we're reading now is an experience of extraordinary now of the pandemic. We are in the new, and the new is always unknown, and the unknown is always full of illuminations and dangerous aspects, so that we fall easily into the darkness and rise easily to what may be a false light, or rise to some sort of possibility of illumination and revelation. Yes, we can hear the beat and feel the beating we're taking. The global membrane is a heart, its effects like tides in our ears felt on our skin. Simultaneously, its effects can be noisy, invasive drives that incite a need to arrest and even kill its pull. Opening time, closing time. Will one effect prevail over the other? I pray for courageous souls willing to embrace openings and closings. I pray for hearts that can perceive dark energies and dimensions of possibility. I hope for the language of the communion of souls. We're turning in this world, the emergence of planetary consciousness, the time of the galvanized atmosphere of thought and feeling, the impetus and pressures of vast meaning. It's meaning coming to us from the atmosphere, and a meaning we're projecting, creating with our machines and communicating devices. Does it matter if any of us like the rapid processes of transformation? The evolutionary pulse throbs on in hyperspeed. The new electric environment is a collective poem, McLuhan said. This means we sample together what poets and visionaries have perceived and prophesied. All is vital, permeating, amorphous, shape-shifting in a stream of shimmering electrons, atoms. All things radiate, interpenetrate. Everything connects and can be sensed anywhere. Time is mercurial. Everything endures in new forms because energy is being constantly transmuted. The effects of energy will be directly felt and absorbed through the material fields of technology. Matter is reshaped because of technological manifestations. We struggle for clarity, definition, form, precision, because we know existence is in flux. Our created realms are sites where the spirit and our spirits roam, because we know that our rooms and clocks don't have a radical hold. Now we send, receive. Screen sites turning us into hyper angels and hyper demons, though truly we're new mythic creatures, part flesh, part energy currents, often masked avatar beings, often released to flit like Shakespeare's Ariel.
If you enjoyed this presentation of The Charge in the Global Membrane, be sure to check out this and many of Powe's other works on Amazon. Thank you.